Why, hello there, everybody. It's me, Philip Campbell, and today I'm actually going to be explaining something on this channel called Mr. Campbell Explains. It seems like for a long time I've just been reacting to meme videos and posting schlock, but today I'm actually going to do something educational. It's because I got a nice email from a student who wanted me to explain something to her. So this is the email I got from student Emily. She says, "Hey, Mr. C, can you explain to me how nuclear weapons work? Specifically, what makes them different than a normal weapon? I get the idea that they are much bigger and dangerous than normal weapons, but that's about all I understand. Thank you, Emily. P.S. Love your classes." I like how this email is called Little Question. Like, oh, I just got a little question. How do these world-destroying weapons function? Just a tiny little thing I want to know. I did have a little bit of an email exchange with Emily, and essentially she's asking this question in the context of trying to understand the big deal about the Cold War. In my American history and modern European history courses, we talk a lot about the Cold War and how the advent of nuclear technology really changed the way that international diplomacy happened when all these different sides had nuclear weapons. And she's trying to understand what was so radically different about the possession of nuclear weapons that fundamentally altered how nations react to one another, their levels of aggression, their diplomacy. Why were nuclear weapons such a big deal during the Cold War? So I can't answer this. We're going to have to get a little bit into physics. I'm going to try to explain this as succinctly as I can and not get too bogged down in the physics of it. But a little bit of this is necessary to really understand the distinction. So as someone who grew up during the tail end of the Cold War in the 1980s, and there's me in the 1980s holding my stick and shouting. But as someone who grew up at the tail end of the Cold War, I often have to remember that things that were pretty much like current or self-evident to those of us who grew up during that time are not so to the younger generations. Like, I grew up hearing about the Soviets and nuclear warfare and stuff like that. It was on the news all the time during the Reagan administration, and I remember asking my dad who the Soviets are and why are we enemies with the Russians and what's nuclear weapons? And my dad, I'm like a little child, and he told me, he's like, well, they have, you see, son, they have these missiles, and at any moment, if they launch their missiles, we're all going to be incinerated and die instantly. And I was like, whoa. So, this was something that was kind of in the back of my psyche when I was growing up. That, like, I'm playing on the playground and like, oh, at any moment the Russian missiles could fall and wipe us all out. I'm being a little facetious, but the point is it's a generational thing. If you grew up with this, you're more likely to understand it. So I totally get Emily's question, and let's get on to answering it. So to understand what makes a nuclear weapon different from a conventional weapon, we have to understand how conventional weapons work. So a conventional weapon like dynamite or an artillery shell or a bomb, it releases energy by combustion from breaking apart chemical compounds. So you can think of it as like a very fast, violent chemical reaction. It's kind of in the same category of things as burning wood or setting off a firecracker. It's just much more faster and much more intense. So this is what happens, for example, when gunpowder is ignited. And all conventional weaponry releases energy based on these chemical reactions. Now, nuclear weapons are doing something fundamentally different. They are cracking open the cores of the atoms themselves, and the energy that is locked inside the atomic nucleus is so powerful. It makes the reactions in a chemical reaction look trivial by comparison. This is why a nuclear weapon that's small enough to fit inside the back of a pickup truck is powerful enough to destroy an entire city. While if you had a conventional weapon of the same size, the damage would be much more localized. So the first thing to understand is that a nuclear explosion is not simply a bigger explosion, it's a different kind of explosion entirely. So let's dig into this a bit more. So now we need to get a little bit into the physics, and I hope you'll forgive me if I look down at my notes a little bit to keep myself on track. But The core idea behind a nuclear explosion is that matter is frozen energy. So let's begin with Einstein's famous equation, E equals mc squared. Most of you have heard of this equation, but few know what it actually means. So let's break it down. The E stands for energy. M is mass, that's the amount of matter in something. The C is the speed of light, which is about 186,000 miles per second. And so C squared means you square that number, which makes it enormous. So what this equation is saying is that energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. And what this means is that mass and energy are actually the same thing in different forms. Matter is, in a very real sense, condensed energy. A tiny amount of mass, if you convert it, releases a staggering amount of energy, because to release it, you're multiplying it by the speed of light squared. So this is kind of a key insight into what makes nuclear weaponry so powerful. You don't need to convert much mass at all to release a catastrophic amount of energy. So this means that the atom itself is a compressed source of energy, a compressed battlefield, if you will. Now, we zoom into the atom. I know you students know the basics of the atomic structure. You've got a nucleus of protons and neutrons in the center, and then there's electrons orbiting around it. So let's focus on the nucleus. The protons in a nucleus are positively charged, and positive charges repel one another. So this begs the question, why doesn't the nucleus just fly apart? Well, because besides the repellent force of the positive charges, there's a second force at work called the strong nuclear force. And this is extraordinarily powerful at holding the nucleus of the atom together, but it only operates at an extremely short range, basically only across the width of the nucleus itself. So this means that the nucleus of an atom is like in a compressed standoff. The protons are constantly trying to push away from one another, and the strong nuclear force is constantly holding them together. So think of it kind of like a very tightly compressed spring being held together with a rubber band. So what happens when you split the nucleus? Well, there's certain very large, heavy atoms, especially uranium-235 and plutonium-239, which are the ones used in weapons, that have nuclei that are so big and they're so unstable that, in a sense, they're already straining at the seams. So when a neutron strikes one of these nuclei, it pushes the nucleus over the edge, so to speak, and the nucleus splits into two smaller atoms, which does several things. Number one, it releases 2 or 3 free neutrons, which can in turn go on to split other atoms. There's a burst of gamma radiation, and there's a small but measurable loss of mass. And this last point is key. The two new smaller atoms together weigh slightly less than the original atom did. The missing mass didn't just disappear, it was converted into energy, exactly as E equals mc squared predicts. And because c squared is such an astronomically large number, even that tiny sliver of missing mass releases an enormous burst of energy. Okay, I know that was probably more physics than you wanted, but I have to kind of go into the physics to help you understand why this is a different kind of explosion. And this is where it goes from interesting physics to a devastating weapon. You see, those 2 to 3 neutrons released by the first split will go on to hit other uranium or plutonium atoms, splitting them, which releases more neutrons, which split more atoms, and so on. This creates a chain reaction, and if you have enough what is called fissile material, then you have something called a critical mass, which is where that chain reaction becomes self-sustaining and exponential. And in a weapon, this is designed to be uncontrolled, to be self-sustaining, to be exponential, so that the entire chain reaction will happen in a fraction of a second. Okay, here's a good analogy. Imagine you have a room packed wall to wall with mouse traps, and each mouse trap is set with 2 ping pong balls. So if a mouse trap goes off, it's going to launch the 2 ping pong balls, and each ping pong ball will hit another mousetrap, and those two mousetraps will launch their two balls. So it will launch the two balls will launch four balls, will launch eight balls, and pretty soon every single ping pong ball in the room is going to be launched pretty much simultaneously in a chain reaction. There's a cascade effect of ping pong balls going everywhere. And that's what happens in a nuclear chain reaction, except the ping pong balls are moving at enormous speed, and the energy released at each step is derived from the conversion of matter itself, and it's cataclysmically powerful. Okay, so just as a nuclear explosion is a different type of detonation from a conventional weapon, so the type of damage it does is different. And there's various types of damage that kind of go out from ground zero in concentric circles. So let's start with right at ground zero. This is where the bomb is dropped. Here at ground zero, the temperature reaches millions of degrees Fahrenheit. This is hotter than the center of the sun. The people at ground zero, they are simply vaporized. They are just not, they're just ceased to exist. Everything under ground zero is just absolutely, it's not even burned up. It's completely vaporized. Now, within roughly a mile, there's a thermal pulse of intense heat that radiates outwards, igniting everything in its path simultaneously. People that are caught in this zone suffer pretty much instantaneous fatal burns. And it's not that fire is spreading in a conventional sense, it's just that fire is everywhere simultaneously. Now, at the same time, there is a massive pressure wave, a blast wave that radiates outward, which collapses buildings, it shatters glass, it throws people and debris at lethal speeds, and anything that survives the initial heat wave is going to be destroyed by the concussive force of the blast wave. This is what you see in some of those old videos from the 1950s of nuclear bomb tests. This can cause severe damage even several miles out from the explosion. Now, several miles out, the heat ignites countless individual fires across a very wide area, which can merge into a single massive firestorm that consumes everything within it and creates its own internal wind system that pulls oxygen toward the center and makes escape nearly impossible. This is what killed the majority of the victims at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And finally, there is radiation, both the immediate burst of gamma radiation at the moment of explosion and the radioactive fallout that drifts downwind afterwards. It contaminates water, contaminates the soil, and people for miles around suffer from radiation sickness, cancer, and death in the days, weeks, and years that follow the nuclear blast. Now, in terms of visualizing what this would actually be like for the people living in the blast zone, I mean, really all we have is survivor testimonies from Hiroshima and Nagasaki to go by. But I think the best cinematic depiction of this remains the nuclear apocalypse scene from 1991's Terminator 2, which I'm going to roll right now, and I'm going to shut the sound off so that I don't get a copyright strike. Yeah, maybe don't watch it if you're if you're a little sensitive to stuff like this. But then again, we all had to be traumatized by it back in the 90s, so I think it's only fitting that you get traumatized by it as well. Lovely little weapon we created there, isn't it? Well, if you want to play around with seeing what kind of damage a nuclear bomb would cause in your area, there's a great website called Nuke Map. You can find it at nuclearsecrecy.com/nuke map. And it allows you to select anywhere in the United States, really. You can select a city like Los Angeles or Honolulu, or you can just drag it wherever you want to on the map. I'm going to put it to Chicago, Illinois. And then you can select what size bomb you want to drop. So let's drop a nuclear bomb. Let's do Fat Man. This is the size of the bomb that was dropped on Nagasaki. And then you can choose what you want it to show. Do you want it to show casualties, radioactive fallout? Okay, so let's zoom out a little bit, and we'll detonate the Nagasaki bomb on Chicago. Okay, so you can see it shows you the different concentric circles. It shows you ground zero. Everybody in the red is going to be instantly vaporized. Then the people in the green are going to be the ones that are immediately burned to death in the firestorm. And then you have the people caught in the concussive blast and the conventional fires out here. And then this largest circle is those who are going to be caught in whatever damage makes it out that far. And you can see here that it estimates 164,000 deaths, 204,000 injuries. But you know what's scary? This isn't even the biggest bomb. Like, they measure the size of nuclear bombs in terms of their kiloton or their megaton output. There's much more powerful weapons than this. So if we go all the way down, look at the Tsar Bomba, which is the 100 megaton bomb designed by the Soviet Union. It is the largest nuclear weapon ever developed. And let's pick a different city. Let's where are we going to drop a Tsar Bomba? How about New York City? Okay, New York. So we're going to drop a Tsar Bomba on New York City, and we're going to see the casualties and the fallout and the airburst. Okay, so let's go all the way down. Want Tsar Bomba. All right, let's see. Holy smokes, look at that. So we've got, if this bomb was dropped on New York City, we've got 8 million dead and 6.6 million injured. So hopefully you can understand why this is not just a bigger weapon. It's an entirely different and unprecedented kind of weapon whose destructive power is completely different order of magnitude from conventional weapons. And so maybe now you understand why nuclear weaponry was such a big deal during the Cold War. And honestly, it's still a big deal today. A lot of our tension with the country of Iran has to do over Iran ostensibly trying to obtain nuclear weapons and the Western powers trying to prevent them from doing so. How many nuclear bombs would it take to, say, destroy the United States, or at least completely topple us from our position as a world superpower? It's been estimated that 500 nuclear weapons dropped on our major population centers would be enough to completely topple our government and throw our society into utter chaos. And there's been people who've actually put together maps like the one you see here showing where these nuclear weapons would be dropped. That's just 500 of them would do in our country. Now, during the height of the Cold War in the 60s and 70s, there was an estimated 70,000 nuclear weapons in existence, most of them between the United States and Russia, who were enemies with each other and constantly had these nuclear weapons trained on each other's cities. So if just 500 nuclear weapons would be enough to completely end the United States as a country, and honestly probably kill 80% of our population, 90% maybe of our population, you can imagine the danger that could be posed by 70,000 nuclear weapons, especially if all of them were launched simultaneously. It would be possibly an extinction level event. And this is why nuclear weapons were and are such a big deal, because with the development of nuclear technology in 1945, humanity, for the first time in the history of the world, possessed the technological capability to destroy ourselves, to destroy the entire planet. Obviously, we've always been capable of doing great damage before that, but it wasn't until the advent of nuclear weapons that we literally became capable of ending humanity. And it could end just like that. During the Cold War, if someone in the White House had decided to push that button and launch all our nuclear missiles at Russia, and Russia had retaliated, had seen, oh my gosh, they just hit the button, we're going to hit our button, nuke us, all our allies, we're nuking all them, and all 70,000 missiles go off, that could have ended the human race. Now, thankfully, since the 1980s, with strategic disarmament agreements begun under Reagan and Gorbachev, but then continued into the 1990s, there are many, many, many fewer nuclear warheads in operation today. I don't remember how many fewer, but it's quite a bit fewer. It's still something to be worried about, but it's quite diminished since the time of the Cold War. And this is why just nuclear weaponry, nuclear technology, it's kind of like, it's the dilemma of a super weapon. If you invent a super weapon, you immediately have to start worrying about who else might get their hands on it, right? We have a nuclear weapon, and now we have to worry who else is going to get it, because we might feel like we can trust ourselves, but we can't trust anybody else with it. But all those people, those countries, they're going to think, well, we don't want to be the ones that don't have the nuclear weapon when others do, because it's kind of a deterrent. One of the reasons why we never had a nuclear exchange during the Cold War is that multiple parties had nuclear weapons. So it's like, yes, we had all ours, but a deterrent against us shooting ours was knowing that Russia would shoot theirs and that nobody would win. It was something called mutually assured destruction. To use a nuclear weapon was mutually assured destruction. Nobody would win, but everybody would lose. So it's a conundrum. It's a big conundrum. And honestly, probably be better if these things just never existed, because they're so horrific. Anyhow, that's my answer to your little question, Emily. I hope you guys found this educational. I hope you can sleep better at night now, understanding what being caught in a nuclear thermal blast would look like. And yes, if you have any questions that you want me to answer, history things you want me to explain, just shoot me an email. And here's the email address. You can email me, and I will do my best. All right, take care.